They try to fake aging by playing at Metallica records.
Are you kidding me?
If you don't like it, it doesn't matter what the flavors are, you don't like it.
Ray put us in touch with Josh Mantell, who does whiskey tastings and beverage events.
If you have a cool name, you're going to get people to buy.
You're almost as old as John.
This is true. So this one is a bourbon or American?
This is bourbon whiskey, so it's made in Washington State.
Trying to drink it like hot coffee. Like really hot coffee. That's actually the entire reason why I don't like Macallan.
Hey, what's the difference between bourbon and whiskey?
Bourbon is...
Hey, welcome to the Rumble, Matt. What's going on, brother?
Oh, I'm excited for today.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
What do we got going on today?
We're going to taste some whiskey.
Whiskey. Oh, you know what?
And some scotch.
That's one of my favorite subjects, whiskey. So who do we got here tasting whiskey? I know we got Ray.
We got Ray. Ray put us in touch with Josh Mantell, who does whiskey tastings and beverage events here in Tucson.
I've got to tell you, I thought Josh was going to come in here looking like a 90-year-old man with a cane, smoking a stogie, somebody that would be an expert on whiskey. That's the world I came from, right? Could you imagine the guy sitting there in his old recliner, swishing his whiskey around, chewing on his stogie, but in walks Josh. What the hell, man? What are you, like 12 and you're drinking?
You could grade me up in post-production?
Yeah.
You could make it look like it. By the
We
way.
could.
Yeah.
How are you, sir, first of all?
I'm doing great. It's a little cold outside.
Yeah, well, wait till I turn on the air conditioning in here. Okay.
Born and raised Tucson, and anything below 60 is freezing.
Yeah, what school did you go to?
Catalina Foothills.
Catfoot.
Yeah.
You weren't in that shitty band, were you?
I actually was.
Okay. And we also have Ray.
Yeah.
Ray's with Long Realty. He is another agent with us, and I can tell you he works amazingly. In other words, he's here every day and puts the time in. So any success he gets is because of his hard work. So Ray, thanks a lot for connecting us with Joshua, with a Catfoot band player. So my daughter went to University High. Obviously, you probably figured that out pretty quick when I said Catfoot. So welcome to the show. All right,
absolutely.
And anybody from Catfoot that brings me this many bottles of whiskey in one sitting,
I hope this is a good omen and a token of my apology.
All right, not a worry, not a worry. But why am I not seeing Jack Daniels in here? Come on, that's America's
I
whiskey.
actually do have Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
But I assume that you guys and a lot of my experience, a lot of people in Tucson, they drink American product. So I was trying to bring something different.
So Matt, what was that question you were referring to? Like, what's the difference between like a Jack Daniels and a $2,000 bottle of whiskey?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most people, it's turned into kind of like the wine industry, where it's like, how pretty is the label?
Yeah.
And most people probably look at it and go, oh, it's $75 or it's $129. Like, it's going to be better. I've bought stuff myself that's, an $80 bottle, and it's still sitting there with like one sip out of it because I hate it. And I'm waiting for somebody to come over to the house and finish it off for me. But are people better to just find what they like and then just stick with that and screw all the marketing garbage?
I mean, you should always drink what you like first and foremost.
All right.
What kind of, and this is going into the backstory, we can talk about that later.
I feel like we should card Joshua.
You can, yeah.
Okay, wait, go ahead. Okay. No, I'm teasing you.
It's very flattering at
yes,
this
absolutely.
age, at this ripe young age of 65.
Yeah.
You're almost as old as John.
This is true. I'm sorry.
All good, happens.
But yeah, no, what kind of got me into this whole thing was that there's this stigma around kind of sommelier and sommelier culture, where it's the stiff wine person in the corner telling you you're an idiot and that they know better than you. And while that might be true, there's these guys who crowdfunded a distillery in southern Texas. I believe they're in Austin. Their whole thing was just like, the best whiskey is the whiskey you like, the way you want to drink it. And that's kind of the
Garrison?
idea. It's Fang and Feather.
I haven't.
If you have a cool name, you're going to get people to buy.
Yeah.
We just went over to that one store, and there were so many options, right?
There's a lot.
So I like Johnny Walker, okay, but I also like a Johnny Walker that has a dragon on the front of the label.
That is true.
And I went there looking for that specific bottle because the dragon on the label.
Yeah.
And then I was turned around because it was $350.
Oh yeah.
Josh, you're a great guy, but I'm not going to serve you a $350 bottle of whiskey today.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I don't blame you.
because is it that much better, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some like people might be able to tell the difference between a $100 bottle and a $300 bottle. I'm not one of those people. I know what I like. I buy it. I don't care if it's $35 or $75 bucks.
Well, Gentleman Jack. Now this brings us. We had a little conversation in our car. Gentleman Jack has a true vanilla flavor to it, in my eyes. Right, that's what I pick up. We just had something here, and the lady's telling me to look for this and look for that. It tastes like whiskey, bro.
Yep.
Okay, so why am I not picking up the nuttiness, the grapes, the sweetness, the bitterness, the caramel from the burnt on the barrel? And am I just not have a defined palate, as somebody might say?
I wouldn't say not as having a refined palate, because what sommeliers do and how they train is all association memory, where you will. And one of the best things that I did when I was kind of training and learning to pick out the different tasting notes is you would have someone be like, this tastes like vanilla. And I would go into my cabinet. I would, take some vanilla extract. I'd put it in a little glass. I'd say, this is what real vanilla smells like. Smell the vanilla, go back to the glass. Do I find it? Do I not? And over time, you're just like, you remember what things you eat taste like. If you really love apricots, you'll be able to pick up apricots because your brain knows what apricot tastes like.
But if you hadn't had that in a long time, sometimes that flavor in your mind is different from reality.
It is, yeah. So it's not really important that you keep up to date, but eventually you will just train yourself to pick up some of these notes.
So listen, my liver's looking to jump out of my body and give you a TED talk. It knows more about alcohol than any of us. Okay. All right. And so that's the concern. That's the concern. Okay. Is right. If I continue to go down this path, then it could be a problem.
Yeah.
How much is too much? How much is a taster? How much is a chugger? How much is just a party? So how do we even start to figure this mess out? Because I went down the whiskey aisle, and you've got whiskey from Japan, you've got whiskey from Korea. I mean, you name it, it's there, and you could spend a fortune, and like Matt said, and it still tastes really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some bottles that I've bought that I regret buying.
Me too.
Because I ended up not liking it, or I thought I would like it for certain reasons. But ultimately, and what some stores do is they give you small tastings, or they give you tastings of the cheaper versions of it that you can kind of get an idea of what their characteristic profile is. But for the most part, I mean, sometimes you just pay for brand. Yeah. My biggest gripe, and I love some of the Johnny Walker stuff. The Green Label is one of my favorites from their lineup. But sometimes I recognize you're paying for brand. A lot of the special edition blue labels, you're paying for the artistry, and less so for the whiskey, because the whiskey's the same.
Right. I enjoy it, and I like the bottle, but I just don't need $350 sitting on my shelf.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And there are some bars, even in town up in Phoenix, that will have some of these. And I always tell people, before you buy a bottle, or if you're thinking about buying a bottle anywhere, even starting at $80, if that's a high price point to you, because price is so relative.
Right.
So an $80 bottle of whiskey could be someone's like expensive, this is my gem. But if you're already in the whiskey kind of nerddom and industry, $80 is not that bad, and your idea of expensive is in the $700 mark.
So is this okay? So I am an amateur photographer. I've spent a fortune in cameras, fortune in lens, you name it, the gadgets. I probably got it somewhere in my house and never used it. Okay, I hope my wife doesn't listen to that. So is it kind of the same thing? This is my hobby, and I taste whiskey for a hobby, and that's why because I'll spend $3,000 on a camera.
Yep.
$5,000 on a lens. All right. But this is my hobby. I'm going to spend $300 on a bottle of whiskey because that's what I enjoy to do. Is that the way to look at it?
I think that's a great way to look at it. I can't do that anymore since I've turned this hobby into a business.
Yeah.
So my personal collection is part of my product. And if I ever do finish a bottle, I need to be able to replace it because someone might want it.
Right.
But it's kind of the same way. You kind of have it somewhere in between of a hobby that you constantly interact with, but it's also part collecting. And depending on who you talk to, they will err somewhere in the middle. I never collect. I open every bottle I buy because I really love it. And I find that experiencing new flavors, trying new things is fun, and that's what I enjoy
You
about it.
You played with your Hot Wheels, didn't you?
Oh, I did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
and my Beanie Babies.
Yeah, that's right.
Much
Yeah,
to
that was my
chagrin.
retirement plan, man.
Oops.
Yeah.
So how did a 19-year-old kid get into this?
Well, it started with after 5 years of doing university for electrical engineering and data analytics. We kind of hit the 2019-2020 lockdown. Everybody was inside, kind of feeling bad, drinking a lot, and because of that, a lot of bartenders at really nice bars, really prestigious places that are really exceptional and forward-thinking in the service industry, they couldn't work.
Right.
So they turned to YouTube, they turned to blogs, and they said, we need to make money. We have this skill set, we have this knowledge. Let's give it to people. Let's talk about it. People are actually kind of taking interest to it. Let's see what we can do. And I kind of got started into mixology and seeing how different flavors pair together. Through that, a buddy of mine was really into Scotch. I got into gins and ryes because I wanted big, brash flavors. And then he got me into Isla Scotch, which is probably one of the biggest, brashest, and to some disgusting flavors you could ever have in a glass. But it just clicked for me, and I loved it. And then after that, it kind of was a hobby for 2 or 3 years. And then I learned about a sommelier, more education program. And after doing that, I was just like, man, this would be a pretty cool job if I could go to people.
Turn your hobby into a job and actually enjoy it.
I get paid to hang out with people and drink whiskey. That's
wow.
awesome.
You're my hero.
Matt, I got one more question before we start turning the program really over to him. Do you have anything so I don't just shut you out?
No, I think once we start tasting stuff, we'll kind of come up with another group of questions. But just to kind of let everybody know what we've got here from the beginning, we've got Scotch whiskey, we've got bourbon, we've got Japanese whiskey, we've got wheated whiskey, and then another one from Washington. So the wheated one is from Oregon Spirit.
So
we're going to talk 72% wheat, which is more than a lot of the wheated ones apparently, which are more like 52%. So it's much more wheat, no corn.
Yeah.
So that's the difference, I guess, between this one and say another wheated bourbon like Maker's Mark or something like that. Yeah. Or Larceny or one of those that are wheated.
Do you drink Maker's Mark?
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's disgusting.
One of my favorite old fashions.
So much for a sponsor.
Is a Maker's Old Fashioned.
There's different types, right? And so there's Scotch whiskey, there's rye, there's wheat, blah 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 blah. If we took all those names away and we put a glass in front of me, would I know the difference? And or do I have to be trained and educate myself to know those differences?
There are some big indicators.
Okay.
If you're just going in completely blind, like if I just pick someone off the street who's, their whiskey experience is shots of Jack or Jameson in a bar, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you. There are some kind of big categorical flags, and I'll talk more about it once we get to tasting these guys. But depending on the grain and the process of making, it will lead to certain big flavors. That's why bourbons are associated with vanilla, oak, caramel. Rye, you get more of that kind of baking spice, allspice flavors. But there's still a lot of both locale, it's made close to bourbon, and ingredient-wise, it's close to bourbon, so you're still going to find some of those. But the baking spices are more prominent. With Scotch, a lot of the time you're looking at cask, what it's in, will bring a lot of those flavors. And with Japanese whiskey, it's all over the place.
You mean like if it's in like a barrel that had something else in it before?
Yes.
Like sherry or something like that?
Absolutely. That's exactly what
Is it only distilled in wooden barrels?
Yes.
I mean, all whiskey, is that what makes it a whiskey?
Yeah. All whiskey, depending on where you are, and whiskey history is just a history of people fighting over what is its legal definition.
Right.
Which is far less interesting than actually drinking it.
Don't they make beer first, essentially?
Yeah.
And then they strip out the alcohol?
And that was a huge part of some of the American single malt distillers. I was in Denver, and Stranahan's has their distillery or their brewery next door.
Yeah.
And they used to just take the mash from the brewery and just distill it into whiskey. Now they got different processes and stuff like that.
We were told that this one is a single barrel.
Yes.
Okay. It came from a single barrel. So I instantly went to one of those real small barrels. Is that the single barrel that's coming out, or is it a huge single barrel?
It could be. All the barrels have different names depending on their size. But single barrel just means that bottle came from one barrel. Because typically what they do is when you're making a whiskey, you have tons of barrels, rick houses full of barrels. And you're like, this is the product of the bottle and bond, the regular one.
Yeah.
And they typically have an idea in mind their distiller and their blender have an idea in mind, and they kind of pick between these barrels, which all taste slightly different, to kind of hone in on what they want the final product to taste like.
Yeah, that's
And
what
that way-
kind of what she was saying. She said they have 3 people,
Yeah.
and they all have to agree
Yes.
that it's that type of barrel. Otherwise, they take it away and they use it in something else.
Yeah, and then single barrels are a bit more of like a fingerprint type of release, where it will taste similar to other single barrels, but it really is a unique experience. And that kind of what draws people to buy single barrels is because this is the only one like this.
Oh, so if you love it, then you're never going to get the exact same thing again.
Never going to
likely.
get the
Yeah.
exact same thing.
Okay, but this wasn't real expensive. I mean, it wasn't cheap for my budget.
No.
But it wasn't real expensive.
It's like $45 at Total Wine today.
Yeah, there
It's
you
on
go.
sale, but-
Yeah. Speak to Sue Horn. She's ready to help
She's
you.
their
Okay.
sommelier.
But what I'm trying to say is, then why is that not cost more if we're using a smaller barrel? The amount of pull out of it's going to be less. We're going to only get 50 bottles out of the barrel comparatively
They have other single barrels too.
Yeah.
of the same thing.
Yes.
Of the same
So,
label.
instead of having for example, 100 barrels and blending them all together,
it's a
they'll do a
blend.
single barrel run of this is barrel 1, barrel 2, barrel 3.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that's
I
how
think
they
Sue
do it.
said they did 15 barrels of
Oh.
a single barrel wheat.
But that's still not much to
Well, they're
market
pretty
with.
small. They do like 685 barrels a year.
But he has to go into every Total Wine. I'm sure they're contracted across the United States. Why is that not a $5,000 bottle of whiskey if it's so limited?
If they're not known, if you're not Macallan, if you're not Jim Beam, people, they're like, why am I spending this much? They could just be new, and it is only, I think some of their older ones were about 5 years old.
Right.
That's not exactly
Old in the whiskey.
extra aged in the whiskey world. Also, it is
that's what
primarily a
these are, too.
wheat whiskey. Wheat is cheaper than corn.
Okay.
And stuff like that.
So I got a question just about a specific, and then we should probably start tasting some
Sure.
because
Yeah,
there's going to be a
absolutely.
million questions after that too. But so is Weller right now? Is that just the epitome of marketing?
Oh yeah, the Wellers, the Pappy Van Winkle, everything coming out of Buffalo Trace. To be fair, the distillery is trying to combat it. They actually have a hotline that you can report like
Oh, the prices in
unauthentic or incredulous
Price gouging.
price gouging, secondary market stuff,
So wait,
because they know how sought after.
I've seen
is.
it go up just the green. So the base
Mm-hmm.
Weller go from like $100 to $200 in the last
Yeah,
year.
and it's what people will pay
It's
for.
the same thing.
Yeah.
I bought one at 100 because I wanted to see what all the hype was about, but it was just kind of average.
disappointing.
And a lot of those
Not
guys, they're worth it.
disappointing. I mean, it's
that
good,
price.
but at that price, I've had better.
We've had those conversations, Josh and I, and you and I, about Blanton's like last
Yeah.
week, and different things that, say, 7 or 8 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
you could get for $48 a bottle, and now it's $120.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's because, supply and demand, and
The downside of that is if you really like something,
it's hard to get.
and that's one of yours that you really like, then you got to either bite the bullet or find something else.
Right, and that's the thing. So we found out that, if you're willing to pay for it, it's all about, just like with houses and everything else.
Sure.
What's a buyer willing to pay?
Look at Ray
And
rolling
what you
real
like,
estate.
right?
Yeah,
I
what
mean,
you like. And so
buy what you like.
I love my Blantons, so
Yeah.
whenever I can find a bottle or get a bottle, I will. He went all the way to Japan and got me
She loved Japan.
Japanese release of Blantons that's made only for the Japanese market. And man, was that great.
Wow.
And so I try to save enough to where, because once you get rid of something, it's not like you can get more unless you go to where that was.
It was old too, if I
was
remember.
old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Did
from
you-
like the
would you-
91 or 92.
What did you think of Japan when you went over there?
Oh, I love Japan.
Wasn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there.
That's on my
pretty
bucket
I lived
list. I
there
want
for
to
a
go.
couple of years, and I had a great time. But the Japanese whiskeys and everything, I mean, I like bourbon, I like scotch, and I tell you what, my own palate, I'm used to a lot of different things, but he has also educated me on some things. We've had some tastings at his place, and I tell you what, I've tasted some things that are like, I can see why it's this much.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So,
Because you formed your palate.
yeah.
You've drank enough, right? Instead of the guy that's on Mad Men who's got a really expensive bottles up on his shelf just because, well, besides advertising, but for in that market, in that world, that's the you've got to have this certain whiskey on your shelf if you're going to entertain clients, right? And
So do you only taste stuff when you're doing your thing? Just what do they call it? Neat.
When I am tasting whiskey, I typically do it neat, or what I'll introduce you guys as well is a couple drops of water.
Okay.
Got these little eyedroppers.
Which is the ice cube for me.
Yep.
I mean, nothing's better than an ice cube in a glass of whiskey.
No, I agree.
An ice cube is great. There's some problems with that, and I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong.
That's how I like it, right?
I'm just I view myself as like an educator, and not to be like one of like the pompous guys who says that you're wrong. I'm not trying to be the wine person.
You're not trying to be that whiskey a-hole.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be that. But if you're drinking like a whiskey or something like that, and you put some ice, and you're like, it's tasting this way, I'm just like, this is why.
Okay. Well,
Because everything is a combination. Everything is an ingredient into the final product that you're sipping.
all right. So we're going to get ready to get started. Do I need to cleanse my palate? Do I need to, in between drinks, do I have any, what do I need to do? Eat an olive,
We should
eat an onion?
probably start with whatever is lowest in APV.
Well, let's break open the Japanese one.
Sure,
Let's
yeah.
start with, since you guys brought up Japan, and 3 out of the 4 of us have been there.
One we brought for Ray.
Oh,
Thanks, Ray.
That he's not allowed to have.
Right.
That's okay. We'll experience it for him. So what's the name of that?
United States
This is
military.
Kaigan.
Watch out for Ray
Yep.
today.
It's
He's
a
gonna
limited
be
release.
Clear of alcohol.
A fine blended malt whiskey from Japan.
All right. So blended. What's it mean?
Blended means that it is not from a single malting.
Okay.
So it could be, realistically, and this is another huge issue with Japanese whiskeys, is it could be from anywhere in Japan. And sometimes it can be even from outside of Japan.
So we may not even get the same
Really?
flavor twice.
It's because they actually blended it in Japan, then they call it Japanese whiskey.
Yes.
Interesting. I went to a bunch of, like in Ireland, I did the Jameson, and I did another small distillery
Have you
there.
hold up the glass?
Yeah, so like to coat it, is that like a thing? Like,
Yeah, so whiskey, kind of like gin. I mean, to some extent, it can or can't bruise depending on who you ask, but there is a good way of getting a lot of nose on it, where if you roll it around the glass and you
you
get
can
that
see it on
wash
the
line,
inside of it. Yeah.
yeah, you get the legs, and then that will aerosolize and get you a lot more on the nose if you're trying to get more out of it. But yeah, blended whiskey could just be a blend of, it is a blend of malt whiskey, so this is going to be all malted barley. There's no rice, there's no other type of grain in here. And it says limited release, which ultimately doesn't mean anything.
It means more money for them.
It means that people will want to buy it more,
yeah. And they put it in a fancy box.
Okay, I don't care for that.
You don't?
I don't.
I haven't tried it yet.
And Japanese whiskey
Oh,
is rooted in Scottish tradition, just from how the Japanese started distilling. So you're going to find typically a lot of Scotch notes, and specifically if you're nosing, and that's what this glass is for.
Yeah.
is it catches most of the phenolic stuff, so it doesn't smell like paint thinner.
but it's harsh on the back of the throat. Am I reading that? Does anybody disagree with that? Once it becomes harsh in the back of the throat for me, then it becomes unenjoyable. I mean, whiskey.
To me, that tastes like Scotch.
Yeah, and I'm kind of. If you have enough whiskey, that harshness just goes away.
Well, yeah.
It becomes
After the first,
alkaline.
it's always the case. After the first drink at the bar, you could drink anything they bring you.
Isn't that one of the things about dropping some water in it too? Those kind of takes that first
it kind
bite
of takes the
away.
edge off. But also on the first taste of any whiskey that I do, I always tell my clients and anyone I'm drinking with is to try and drink it like hot coffee, like really hot coffee. Just get a little bit in there,
Okay.
so they can kind of coat your mouth. It'll coat your throat, and it won't be as abrasive. It's not this huge flash.
Yeah.
You can kind of ease into it a little bit. But yeah, no, it tastes like a young, lighter Scotch.
Yeah.
Okay, so get it in your mouth, swish it around,
Yeah.
coat your mouth. It does go down a lot easier. I have to
Yeah.
agree. It doesn't hit the back of your throat like a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
And that's not and that's why for me, when the water gets in there and an ice cube, and I know there's reasons why not to do that, and there's reasons why. Then
I wanna hear 'em.
the water rolls down, slows down a little bit, and kind of makes it more enjoyable. Now, tell me why I shouldn't do that.
So
Or should.
we can just start with ice. Is that and it's the same kind of reason why wine has a temperature. Why they tell you certain temperatures to serve wine, is that the temperature will mask or emphasize certain flavors. The colder something is, the less it's going to taste like anything. So if you just want something that is just, if you want the taste of whiskey, but you don't want this really big harsh thing, or if it's just hot out, by all means, put some ice in. I personally don't do it because I typically drink things that I already know that I like, and I know how I like to drink them. And if you're looking to add dilution, Water is a great way.
which is really what I'm doing.
Yeah, you're bringing down the proof, so
Yes.
it's not quite as hot.
Right. Okay. So by chilling it, I heard you. I'm learning. We're bringing down.
You're like chilling is like turning the volume down,
Okay.
and dilution is like spreading it out.
So with an ice cube, you're kind of doing
You're
both.
doing both. So you're double whammy on I'm not tasting what's actually in the glass.
I actually enjoy it with a big old, like one of those big
rock.
round.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I think we all do, right?
it melts slower,
it
so
melts
you
slower,
don't.
yeah.
You can actually, pour another one and still have the same
Yeah.
ice cube. It's not like
That's
some
how I
coolers-
drink some of whiskeys too. The Woodford Double Oak, I really like. It has. I'm not a huge oak guy, but I really love the flavor. So I use the temperature to kind of tone back that oaky tannicness. But I love the flavor of the Double Oak. That's how I drink.
Okay.
So that's something
it's-
that people could get
Yeah.
from learning about the qualities or flavors of and how to get to that point. You can actually change it while you're drinking it based off of what you do to make it fit what your palate wants.
Yeah, and the higher proof the whiskey, the more you will get out of adding dilution. Because all this stuff comes out of the barrel like 65%, somewhere around there, like super hot. And then they cut it with water to get it down to whatever proof they bottle it at. So if you're just adding more water, you're just
diluting.
diluting it more.
Okay. But are you diluting the flavor as well?
It depends.
Makes sense. Okay.
It depends. If you're looking at
You could be
something like
enhancing some, it
43%, you're probably just turning down the flavors.
Okay.
But probably for the bottle and bond here, I didn't bring any with me today, but there's some whiskeys that are bottled at cask strength, 65%, and all those flavors are so compact that sometimes you need a little bit of water to kind of break it
Yeah, I
out.
saw some of those like 125 proof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
that's cask strength essentially.
yeah.
any of these whiskeys that are on the table, would you put a mixer in, or are these all sipping whisks?
I wouldn't mix any of these personally, at least before I tried it.
Right.
If it's at a lower price point, I might add some mixer if I'm just not really trying to sip anything neat. Or certain whiskeys, this one specifically, the reason I brought it is because I don't have to think about it. I just drink it and it tastes good.
Right.
Sometimes
So
I
old
don't want to.
fashioned is like a big thing now. Like everybody
Yep.
wants an old fashioned. People are smoking their old fashions. They're doing all sorts of different stuff to the
It's a
old
great
fashions.
cocktail.
So,
it is.
but really, that's what just your whiskey, your bitters,
And your sugar.
and your sugar,
Yeah.
and then muddled fruit or whatever. And
I hope not.
Throw a couple cherries in it, or what are
If
they?
it's
putting
good
in it?
whiskey, I hope they're not putting muddled
Well, that's
sugar
what
in
you
there,
usually
yeah.
get when you order something like that. It's
So the difference between an old fashioned and a Manhattan is there's no sugar in a Manhattan.
Manhattan has vermouth.
Okay.
That's fortified wine.
Oh, I skipped that part.
so basically you just have whiskey.
Yeah,
And a
it's just
cherry.
straight whiskey and cherry, yeah.
And a cherry. Well, I think every once in a while I'll throw
I
bitters in there.
actually do like a couple of cherries in just like a glass every now and then. Let's do another one that's different. Let's do one of yours.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
it'll be similar.
So do
in
I need to
flavor
rinse this
profile.
out? I guess is what I'm saying.
Probably would be a good idea, but you could just like put a little drop of water, swirl it, and
So let's move on to one of the
let's
scotches.
open one of these guys
you've brought,
here.
so that we can kind of compare that to the Japanese whiskey. Scotch is a different animal.
it is a different animal. It is very similar though. You're going to find a lot of commonalities.
So real quick,
Get everyone
I know that
topped
like
up
when
here.
we were in Ireland, they were saying that they bought like at Jameson anyway. We didn't get into the barrels too much at the other small
Mm-hmm.
distillery that we went to, but they buy a lot of the barrels from America that have
do.
already been used.
Yep, it's a great symbiosis.
Okay.
Because part of the classification that makes bourbon is it needs to be an unused
Oak barrel.
oak barrel that is
It's like white
is
oak
charred.
or something specifically even. Like
Yeah,
the-
a very specific oak barrel, but the most important thing and the reason why it's so good for both parties is that it has to be unused. So once they use it to make bourbon, they can't use it again unless they want to make a American whiskey, something like what the Bottle and Bond, the wheat whiskey here, since it's not bourbon, they can reuse barrels.
okay.
But this great relationship started where the American whiskey makers couldn't reuse their barrels,
So they were just dumping them.
and they're just getting rid of them. And the people in Scotland, they needed barrels.
Yeah.
Their cooperage, and they needed a way to age their whiskey. And because it is already held spirit, the impact of the cask isn't as much. So you're getting a lot lighter, more nuanced tones of the vanilla, those oak flavors, vanilla and cinnamon. And they can use them as many times as they like. Granted, there is a point where you overuse it, and it becomes overly tannic. There's like kind of this like it's like if a wine is corked, where it just kind of tastes like wet dog. Whiskey has an equivalent.
Yeah, I have to ask you if you ever tasted a wet dog. Actually,
I have not, but I grew up with 3 dogs, so I've definitely smelled my fair share.
It smells like what it tastes like, I'm sure.
So the vanilla and the cinnamon I'm not going to say that.
Cinnamon.
Flavor actually comes from the barrel. There is no addition to vanilla in the recipe.
Yeah, there is no imparted flavor. It is actually illegal to tamper with the flavor of whiskey, and it will kind of how they define that will change where you are. The U.S. does not allow colorant at all. Where in Europe they are allowed to add a certain amount of E150 colorant, which is a little duplicitous, since people assume that if a bottle is dark, it's old, it's rich, it's lovely, but they could just add colorant to it.
Okay, but not allowed in the States.
But not allowed in the States.
So what you see through the bottle to what you get here.
Absolutely.
Now, what if it was brought in
from the char in the barrel?
Correct.
Okay. What if something is brought in from Japan? Is that held to the same standards?
I don't know. It's held to the standards of which it is distilled and barreled.
Gotcha.
So if it's not barreled in the United States, they could do whatever they want within the confines of the laws in their country.
Okay.
Japan is currently figuring that out, as I said before, but hopefully that kind of gets solidified.
I'll tell you what, as far as like Japanese whiskeys go, that's the thing. What happened with Yamazaki?
Yeah.
You know, we used to buy a bottle of 12-year Yamazaki 10 years ago for $50. Now you can't buy a bottle of 12-year for under $100.
Well, because it's a 22-year-old now.
Because in 2014,
no one wanted it.
In 2014, it actually happened to win the World Scotch Championships. So that's what drove everything up.
Okay, so really, let's go back to that really quick. I know we'll go to our next one. I already did.
So if you're nosing it,
and
people do have a dominant nostril.
Oh, that's
I got a big nose.
Dominant nostril.
Yeah, you want to. I do it to kind of get across my nose, so I know it's even. But I do. My right nostril smells better than my left, mainly because I have terrible allergies. But a lot of honey.
Yeah.
A little bit of nutmeg, some cinnamon.
You have a very good palate.
Which one is this?
This is the Glenfiddich. This is the one that I love to drink.
This is good.
Just kind of, it's my daily drinker. I buy it at Costco by the bulk.
Just neat. Yep. And that's the way.
And to me, it kind of just tastes like marzipan and just confectionery. And it's just such a nice, it's not overly sweet. It's not saccharine. But it has such a nice kind of fruity flavor. And
all right, so I'm not getting any of that. All right, which is okay. Maybe my nostrils are bad. I don't know. Are you getting any of that?
What do you taste?
we're talking about tasting now.
All right, let's try.
Yeah. Give it a shot.
What the two have to go together, don't they?
Sometimes.
Because
there's certain whiskeys that I don't like because there is a dissonance between what I smell and what I taste.
Okay, because all I'm smelling is dust.
Is dust?
So there's maybe dust or kind of maybe woody, maybe a little bit of wood.
That's probably the grain then, because if you kind of think about cereal grains, that's what it's made out of, is the barley.
I don't know what it is about it, and I don't know if this has anything to do with this versus the other one, but I feel like this one kind of sits on your tongue longer than the other one. Mm-hmm. Again, I have like or don't like I don't have any specific knowledge about why that happens, but
and like or don't like, that is the most important thing for anybody drinking or enjoying anything. If you don't like it, it doesn't matter what the flavors are. You don't like it,
right? Good point.
Yeah.
But I guess I could find like which things from you, somebody who knows it, which one of those kind of palettes or whatever it is that goes into it. So the vanilla, the caramel, the cinnamon, all that kind of stuff. I could kind of, I guess, start to group those things by, okay, I like this as kind of the background flavor.
Yeah, and that's what I love. If anyone at any of my tastings say, I don't like this, I love to hop on that. I'm just like, that's great. Why don't you like it?
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's almost like doing theater. It's that yes and, where it's just like, I don't like it. You're like, okay, why? And they're like, I don't like it.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. You're like, all right, man, sorry.
So I got it. Okay, and it's just a sip and just a little bit of a swish and roll. So is it more roll it on your tongue, or is it to swish it like mouthwash?
Chew it a little bit.
Chew it.
You're kind of like doing the whole circular jaw thing, and kind of moving it around your mouth.
So how much does the breathing
better.
through your nose as you're taking that sip affect what your flavor profile is going to be?
It helps a lot with getting air
Yeah.
and oxygen in, and if someone is having hard time with the proof, that's typically what I do, especially if there's like, oh, this smells super alcoholic. I say, well, smell through your nose with your mouth open.
Yeah.
Open the windows on both sides.
Yeah.
And you're just catching what's going through.
Okay.
And there's a lot of kind of tips and tricks to help people ease into it, because once you're there, it's a lot nicer, but you have to get to the deep end.
Yeah.
So I did add a little water just because that's how I'm used to drinking it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It got better for me. Okay. Just because that was where I'm used to drinking. Right.
And it's kind of like eating a sandwich. This is another analogy I like to use, where it's like, think of that like a whiskey, like a sandwich stacked really high. You can't get your mouth around it. You're not going to be able to get into it. Adding the water, you kind of take it and put it in half.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit more mouth-sized, bite-sized. And you're like, okay, let's keep dividing this out, and eventually you'll be able to take a bite comfortably.
Right.
And that's what the water does.
But if this is the true way to do it is without water, without ice.
Even the Scots do water.
Yeah. Oh, even the Scots. That makes me
Scots
feel
do
better.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they're pro.
Scotch and water.
They don't do ice. They're a little more pure about that because it's part of their nationalism.
Because of the temperature. Okay.
But the water, absolutely, they'll do a couple drops of water.
Okay.
And in my notes, I have this is the engineer in me for my whiskey collection. I have it all cataloged and spreadsheeted.
So will Matt.
And I have with certain whiskeys, or it's like, I like this whiskey with this many drops of water. This whiskey, this many drops of water.
So that's your own personal.
That's my own personal
And he's
choice.
talking drops, man.
Yeah.
I'm an ice cube filled half
from this
whiskey,
guy.
half
But he's
water,
probably
mix it
not
up.
pouring them like this deep either. I mean,
No, I usually do, if I'm at a tasting, I typically do 1/3 of an ounce pours.
Okay.
Because I want you to taste it. And you're not like, if you're paying for me to be there, I'm giving you whiskey.
Right.
I want you to be able to taste it and enjoy it. And I also want you to have enough that after you taste it, one of the best things you can do is come back to the last one you tasted and kind of do an A/B.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, this one smells a little bit more like vanilla. This one smells a little bit more like cherries.
I mean, the reason I
find that as you go sorry, John, but as you go further down the line, like let's say you've got 6 different kinds you're tasting. The feedback that you get from the people that you're talking to gets better as you move along, just strictly from the number that
typically
you
starts as education and kind of ends more like bar talk.
Yeah, okay.
Because, I mean,
fair. That's what I was getting at.
we're
It's
all
like,
drinking.
Then people are like, oh, I really like this one after like 6 of them,
Yeah.
So-
but I also keep the portions low enough that I'm not just tanking them. I want them to remember. I want them. I mean, that's also a business strategy.
Right. Sure.
You want people to remember the good time they had, but you also want them to have a good time.
Let's do a completely
Yeah,
other side of the world.
We're back in
kinda
the States
deal.
now.
Yeah, let's do like a Kentucky bourbon. What do we think about that one? We'll see.
Georgetown. Well, that's one thing about Kentucky. You can't really go too wrong.
Yeah. And admittedly, American whiskey is probably my weakest point. When I was doing my studying, it was a lot and more focused on Scotch and Scottish tradition. And I kind of tangentially brought in American whiskey.
Is it this one?
Yeah. So an interesting thing that, again, in Europe at a distillery, information that I thought was most interesting, at least, was that they have, say, 4 or 5 different types of whiskey that they're going to export to countries, but they only have maybe one that they export to the United States. And the reason why they said that is because the United States in particular has a palate that is more apt to like things that are like bourbon, which is more harsh tasting. The flavor's really heavy.
It's tannic, it's heavy, it's big.
And they don't, so they might send one of their 5 that they make to the United States because they tried it and the United States didn't buy it.
And I'm glad you said that, because that is literally what this Glenfiddich is. This 14-year is only sold to the United States.
Okay.
And there's a very specific reason, is because usually, I mean, the 12-year is great. It's their flagship. It's their entry-level product. It's sherry cask. The 14-year is their more special edition. This is oak cask.
Okay.
This is bourbon.
So bourbon barrels.
Okay.
Bourbon barrels.
So as I made my funny earlier about 14-year-old, that's been 10 liters. Now it's 24-year-old. The numbers are how long it was in the barrel, not how long it's been produced.
The number is the youngest whiskey that is in the bottle, which is not as apparent as it might seem. So there is older whiskey in there.
Okay.
And they have their catalog of the barrels they have across a variety of ages. And they have an idea of what they want the 14-year to taste like.
Okay.
So they blend from inside their own warehouses their whiskey together. And the youngest whiskey, if they're putting 14 years on the bottle, 14 years is the youngest whiskey they're allowed to use and put inside the bottle.
Oh, okay.
That's why if you have something like the Kaigan, and this is not a sign of poor quality, which is another thing that I really love to fight against, is that age is a sign of quality. I mean, we've tried this, and we're all kind of, at least you didn't like it.
I didn't care
I'm
for it.
kind of so-so on it.
Yeah,
I'm giving that one to Matt.
There's no legality. They could put something straight off the stills into this thing, and it would be perfectly fine.
Interesting.
So this one wasn't bad. What'd you think of this one? You like this
Well,
one?
this is one of my favorites all the time.
The Bardstown, yeah.
Barstone?
Yeah, old Bardstown.
And if you're coming into it on the nose,
Yeah.
you get a lot more of the spice. Kind of the spices that I was mentioning for the Glenfiddich kind of turned up a little bit. A lot more caramel, a lot more oak. The vanilla kind of, to me at least, takes a backseat
Yeah,
a little bit.
that's good. I like that one. Right.
So besides your services, do you sell whiskey as well at your
I don't.
tastings? Okay.
I don't. That's a whole separate legality.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
just selling education.
I am selling me.
Yeah.
I think you're doing a good job, man.
Thank you.
So what's next? This was Matt's daily driver.
like
It
that
appears to be.
I really like that. Something that I wasn't a huge bourbon guy for a long time because I didn't like the oak. But I've come to really enjoy that kind of like peanut, kind of like the crumpled shell, dusty note that comes off bourbon sometimes.
Okay, what's the difference between bourbon and whiskey?
Bourbon is, amongst other things, it has to be 51% corn. It has to be majority of the corn in the mash.
Okay,
And it needs to be aged in a newly charred oak barrel.
right.
Needs to enter at a certain percent. Needs to...
Does it have to be made in Kentucky?
Technically, no, but probably most of the time you will find it made from Kentucky. I forget actually where the kind of the terroir restrictions are. The one I usually get asked a lot of is the blackened, the Metallica whiskey.
Oh, really? Have you had that?
I have not because I think it's a
Marketing.
shit.
Do you really?
They try to hyper age it. They try to fake aging by playing it Metallica records.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not.
Oh my god.
So that's the whole. If you've seen like
wait, they play Metallica albums
I do
inside
like
the
Metallica
the
records.
aging
Yeah.
barrels.
I'm not sure that it would age.
Have you seen any of those like
whiskey.
Jefferson Ocean barrels
Yeah,
and
yeah.
things? So their whole thing is that they put the barrels on a ship. So the rocking of the ship, you get the thing sloshing inside. It gets more barrel contact. And the way that people kind of fake age or hyper age whiskey faster than normally is they vibrate. It's all about barrel to liquid interaction. So they got these, I think this is probably hyperbolic, so I might not be correct on this, but they use the sound waves and the vibration from the Metallica songs next to the barrels to vibrate it to get it to interact. And I'm like, that's that's cool, but I'm not paying extra for that.
That's another marketing
Gimmick, yeah.
Yeah, gimmick.
Yeah.
So what's next? What do we got next?
So this one is a bourbon or American?
This is bourbon whiskey, so it's made in Washington State. I'm
sniffing
Smells
glass.
a little bit hotter.
Yeah.
Because both of these have the same percentage, but there's a lot more alcohol coming off this one.
Oh, I like that one. What was that one? No,
I
that
did
one's
too.
really good. Does anybody else agree with me?
I haven't even tried it yet.
It's probably because I
Ton
blew.
more orange. Adding water to it gives a ton more orange, kind of that orange oil burnt on the nose. I did 2 drops if you want to.
Well, I got to do the dropper, right?
I think it's fun.
I like that one.
Get a little sciencey.
That's good too. It has a lot of the
Well, I think it's-
same profile, I think, as the old Bardstown, but it's like every one of them is amplified a little bit.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you just said that's a little sciencey. I think that's all this is science.
Yeah.
This is chemistry.
You're turning knobs.
Yeah.
It leans more towards the kind of the oak and the caramel. I get a little bit of kind of like,
Oh, well, okay. So with 2 drops of water, that changes it even better for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked that it was only 2 drops to get me there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty darn good.
So that's your spreadsheet.
That's the bottle I'm
info.
I
taking
get
home.
some kind of cocoa. You get some like cocoa?
You said like peanut dust or something on the other
Yeah.
one, like
Kind of like if you crush a peanut shell in your hand and kind of smell it.
okay.
All right, so I like that. So why do I like that so much more than I like that? Because this seems less harsh than that, and maybe
Oh, see,
that's
I got
really.
the opposite.
You added water to this. Did you add water when you had this
I
one?
first tasted it without, and that's when I really
Yeah.
liked it. And then when I added the water, it got even better.
Yeah, but when you had this, did you add water?
Did not.
The lady from this one, Oregon Spirit, actually.
The
I've had this
tannic.
before, but it's
Yeah.
been a number of years.
It makes sense why it's from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Especially if you kind of compare things. The temperature impacts how things age.
Okay.
So if you have something like the Texas whiskey, heat and humidity will impact how fast something ages because it's expanding and contracting the wood.
And it's sitting in a barn, like getting
Yeah.
just cooked all summer
Yeah.
long.
All right.
So
I'm going to throw a wrinkle into this, okay? So I've been to Napa and been on their wine train. And on their wine train in the back, they serve you an array of wines. They also give you chocolate. They give you some
food
meat
pairings.
and cheese and food,
Yeah.
and it changes the wine,
Yep.
okay? Does the same thing happen with whiskey?
it can, yeah.
I mean, could you eat a piece of
It's
chocolate?
not quite as delicate as wine. Whiskey will hold its own a little bit more. So you're going to need stronger flavors or more pronounced items to
steak.
kind of
like a cigar?
Cheese,
like
too,
a
yeah.
cigar.
Is that
Stinky
why
cheese.
cigars and whiskeys are so good together?
Yeah, and typically the interesting because cigar is even stronger.
Right.
So when people do cigars and whiskey, the whiskey is kind of playing second fiddle. The whiskey is your foil. It's boosting up the cigar's flavors.
Right.
But with whiskey, I love kind of fattier or cured meats.
Yeah.
Just because it coats your tongue, it lets you kind of get things through a little bit easier. It's not quite as hot.
So
but
things like what? Like salami?
like Genoa or
Yeah.
Capicola. I go down to like Ford's Meat Market and
Okay.
just get some whatever the guy recommends. Get some slices of it.
But what I got from what you're saying is that you
Mm-hmm.
get more of your opinion or your evaluation of it when you smell it versus when
It's
you're
kinda
tasting
half-half.
it. Yeah.
I really want it to be half-half because I want it to
So is that
smell
like
good.
an expectation that you're going to have though? Like, so
Yeah,
that it
and
kinda
that's something that I
reinforces it or
have.
not?
That's actually the entire reason why I don't like Macallan, is because Macallan smells wonderful. It's expressive. It's fruity. You get honeyed notes. It's like orchard fruit, and then you taste it, and all the knobs were just turned down to one. And I'm like, come on, man.
So what's with the peat for that kind of stuff that everybody talks about? Like that.
I'm a
that's
huge
what
peat
gives
guy.
Gives it the flavor.
I
that
get
it-
why people don't like it because it's kind of a little bit acrid, kind of ashy, smoky. And Brookladdick, these guys, they're from Isla, which is known for their peat. This is an unheated.
Isla, is that how you say that?
Isla, yeah. We're going to get you on the Gaelic.
Yeah, perfect.
here.
I loved Ireland, but I don't know how to say any of that stuff.
But this is a non-peated version of it. So
And we had. Did we
I
have
brought
that?
this for a specific reason as well, is because it's
so
really
Scotland,
local.
Ireland. What are we talking
This
about?
is Scotland. This is Scotland. This is
Isla
from the
is a part of
yeah. It's a region of
it's
Scotland.
a region of Scotland.
Yeah.
Isla.
I've never been there. I
You
should
got
go
the
there.
north- you got the Highlands and the Lowlands and Isla.
South,
So
I
you got
think?
different areas where they do this.
So do they have like huge operations like we do here? Like now there's like
Oh, yeah.
6 distillers that make like 90% of the whiskey and bourbon.
So it's not really.
Is it still more like
So you have a lot of
family
companies.
run, or like do any of them like that?
You have a lot of like family-run distilleries, but what you have are more big corporations like Campari and Diageo,
Oh.
who own multiple distilleries.
Okay. Do they let them have autonomy over what they're making
Not
still?
really.
No. I was curious.
That's
about
why this is such a pleasure for me, is because the Diageo, I believe it's Diageo who owns Glenfiddich, they want to make money.
Yeah.
So they sell whiskey at 40% APV,
Yeah.
the lowest you can make it. And you can, if you're cutting everything with water to the lowest, that's one barrel gives you a ton more bottles.
Wow.
Right.
So do you feel that the independent distiller is popping up a little bit more? Is more people taking this on? I was traveling
used to.
through. Yeah.
For the past few years, there was a huge surge in American independent distilling.
Yeah.
But now, just because of a ton of reasons, markets, alcohol's kind of taken a downturn a little bit. It's not quite as popular as it used to be.
Do you think that's because marijuana's legal?
That's been legal for a long time.
Well, no, but do you think?
No, I don't think so.
I mean,
think it's a
because people are
different-
turning to the other sin.
So
I've been
let's.
seeing
I want to.
generational is like nowadays you see more young people abstaining from alcohol. They're doing the mocktails and they're going out.
Yeah, it's kind of
doing that
trendy
kind of
now.
stuff.
I
So
see
that's
that.
a trendy thing. So you see that there's even mocktail bars.
So you think this is an antique we're drinking
There's
here?
mocktail
Is it gonna-
bars?
oh yeah,
places
absolutely.
that only serve.
Yeah.
Where do you think Matthew goes in?
God, he's mean to you.
So like you get a lot
Come
of young
back at
people
him.
now who say, "Hey, I want to drive. I want to go hang out with my friends, but I want to be part of the action, but I don't want to be drunk."
Yeah,
This
but
world's
I'd
going to be
rather go
so
like
much
a-
better place without us.
I'd rather go to a craft cocktail bar and let them, whoever's driving, order a mocktail there rather than have a whole bar.
And a lot
full
of bars do have kind of a small mocktail selection.
Yeah, sure.
Nowadays.
No, I get that.
Yeah, now they do.
So where I was going is I was driving across Wyoming once, and out in the middle of nowhere is this distillery, and this guy
yeah.
set us up. He had a big jackalope in the front of his where you can climb up on it.
There's a decent sized distillery out of Wyoming.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually not bad.
There's microbreweries everywhere now, right? And there's
Yeah.
people brewing out of their garage, okay,
Yeah.
which has always been around, okay? So can a guy like me go, you know what, I'm going to make some whiskey this
Yeah, you
year?
could.
You probably could, but it's the same with anything that gets really popular. Is you have COVID, post COVID, people are drinking a lot. There's this huge surge, bunch of demand. Places start opening up, but now we're going back to a norm. So I think I heard maybe a month ago. There's a whiskey cast that kind of it's a podcast that does whiskey news.
Sure.
And as far as people in the industry, I think they're saying there was such a surge that now it's not sustainable. And I think it was one distillery per day is closing.
Wow.
So let's put
the
it in
time, it was
perspective.
crazy.
They do 685 barrels a year. That's really small, right?
Well, that's all.
Comparatively, yeah.
yeah.
So that's kind of what was my big concern, right? Is how are they going to keep, if all of a sudden this thing gets popular, how are they going to, it's supply and demand, right?
Well,
That's
and it
how,
takes
I don't
so
know how,
long to get it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're aging it.
That's
so
how
you're planning
whiskey
way ahead.
people, they have to keep the doors open somehow. Like these guys, have you ever heard of the Botanist Gin?
Yeah.
That's these guys.
Oh, it is?
They usually whiskey
gin you
places.
can do quick,
yeah,
right?
You don't have to age it. They sell vodka. They sell gin. Something you
To
can
diversify
just
a
get
little
out,
bit.
keep it coming, get it out the door, have a base level. Because this one is, I think it's 8 years old. You're not going to see profit on this when it goes into the barrel till 8 years. If you're making a 40-year-old whiskey, it's 40 years from now,
right. And so the older the whiskey, the more expensive?
typically.
Okay. And it's just because of the age of the whiskey in there.
It is purely the time
Okay.
that goes into it.
And so we could have barrels sitting right. Is there a 100-year whiskey? Do we have it out there?
I think the oldest one that is being bottled right now is Macallan 82 year?
Holy smokes.
I forget the age, but it was beautiful. It was a hand blown glass kind of gourd that was being held up by these like bronze cast hands that was like twisting up and holding the
They're
bottle.
charging
It
so
was
much they
gaudy
can
as
really,
shit.
really,
Yeah.
really get into
They got
the
to give
presentation.
Yeah.
Got to give them a trophy too, right?
And the crazy thing is, it didn't even outsell the most expensive Japanese.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, I think it was sold for about $800,000. Wow! But the oldest Yamazaki, I think, sold for $1.5 million a bottle.
So is that the record?
I believe so. Because it went at auction. It was the Yamazaki 55.
I'm not. Would you be willing to take that risk on a Japanese whiskey if you
That's
really
an investment.
if you really don't know what their guidelines are over there and what
I
they
don't think people are drinking that whiskey.
nobody cares. They're just
I wouldn't. It'd be so weird to buy something
Unless you got
and
like
put it in a
Bezos
safe.
money.
You're not cracking
You're not
open
drinking
a
that
$1 million
whiskey.
Yeah, right.
whiskey, you know, that's a collector's
Yeah.
thing.
Unless
know,
you win the
so
Powerball.
and there's better. I mean, no offense. I like whiskey just as much as anybody in my own terms.
The guy that buys that for $1 million could probably hold on to that for 10 years and somebody else will buy it for 3.
That some bitch probably doesn't. Even, that guy probably doesn't even drink whiskey.
Yeah, it's like
It's just an investment.
That's
he
what a
locks it
lot
up
of Wall
somewhere.
Street guys do. Is they were for a time investing in vintage whiskey because it's such a stable market.
Yeah.
Because that price is going to
A
hold.
limited supply of,
Yeah.
of that.
Because there's not making any more 100-year
Yeah.
whiskey or
It
80
is
years
finite.
whiskey.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we have one more, right?
Well, we got two more.
We got two
Okay.
more.
well,
So
I want this to be last
We'll
because
end with that.
do
We'll
the-
go with this one.
all right, let's go.
How you say it again?
Brookladdick.
Okay.
Brook Laddick.
Yeah. So this one, it uses only local Isla barley from specific barley fields, and it's the names of the families.
I understand.
So you got the Dunlawson.
So
the
that's not
Muldry.
necessarily marketing. That's history, which is marketing.
Yeah.
But
so
you,
this is more of a kind of what wine people call terroir.
Yeah.
The taste of the place.
Got it.
Of where it's from.
Okay.
So in your opinion, and you're a Scotch guy.
I am a Scotch guy.
So a big difference between this 14-year here that we tried and
this
this
is an
one?
8-year.
Okay.
So it's a little bit younger.
Okay.
You want some water?
Youth will probably mean that it is a little bit hotter, a little bit more phenolic,
Okay, when you say hotter, in other words, it's
more
coming
alcohol.
in a little harsh.
a little more alcohol.
Okay.
Flavor.
It is
smell.
it is a skill of a distiller to not have that note kind of be prominent. I want to bring you through kind of my process because this is one that I have sat with before and kind of it's called deductive tasting. And you kind of think about it like a family tree where you kind of go and you kind of find which line to follow. So if I'm coming into a whiskey, say I don't know what this is,
Okay.
and I smell it, you get that kind of cereal grain note. That tells me that it's probably barley. And you're thinking, okay, what regions of the world make barley whiskey? It's a little bit too light for an American single malt because America, the U.S., it's really hot, and it's not gonna have that body. So I'm thinking kind of probably Japan, maybe Scotland.
That was pretty hot.
And then you also smell a little bit of phenol, a little bit of rubbing
I think I know
alcohol.
what he means by hot
That
now.
tells me it's
can
probably
smell
sub 10 years, somewhere around the 10-year mark. And you're going through. I don't smell any fruit notes. I smell a little bit of vanilla. That means it's probably a
I actually feel like I
barrel.
can smell that a little bit and taste it too.
And you kind of get all these data points, and you're like, okay, what area of the world does barley whiskey, does bourbon barrels, and as far as I'm concerned, that's probably Scotland or Japan right now. But it smells a little too... Japanese whiskey to me has this kind of like mustiness to it. So I don't think this would be Japanese, but I have been completely confused before. They're so close together sometimes.
Okay, so me setting 4 blank bottles up here without you knowing, you could probably
I can make
guess
some
it.
pretty good guesses.
Good guesses at the region, good guesses where it might have come from.
Certain distilleries, I could tell you immediately where it's from.
Does that just come in time?
Kind of, yeah.
Or practice?
I just know what things taste like.
Right.
Scotch with
it
just
Scotch?
even like a few drops of water.
It just opens it up.
Yes.
It's
Didn't it change
way
it?
better, I think.
That for me, I did the
I'm not
small
trying
thing.
to punish myself when I drink
Yeah.
it.
No,
At
no,
first,
good
like, it
points.
goes from my tongue like to the roof of my mouth.
And the
I don't
first
want
thing,
that.
this
and that's
one,
what that did to me.
Yeah.
It
this
scorched
is
me.
super salty as well.
I agree with that.
And to me, that says, okay, we're thinking coastal.
Is that what that is? It's from the
It's from the seawater
water,
into the rick
okay.
house. Yeah.
So this is I think I 3 dropped it.
yeah.
Much
I
lighter,
did
much
like
softer.
five.
That
little
salty
drops in
note
there.
to me
Yeah.
kills the Japanese idea. So I'm thinking right now with that salty note, I'm thinking Scotland.
I think the coolest thing
So they don't do the same way in Japan because
You just don't get
on the,
don't get that saltwater
water.
influence.
Really?
Because these guys, I mean, you can see
I could see that
the
they
actual coastline and how close they are.
Yeah, true.
I think the coolest thing I picked up from you is you said there was a whiskey that actually puts their barrels on boats. So
Yeah.
the rocking of the ocean. So that tells me it's more of a science because
That's
they
a
have put
little-
some in,
yeah.
but that's also marketing.
It is marketing, and with that one, they're not usually aged whiskeys. They're
Yeah.
trying to cheat the system a little bit.
Is it any good?
They're trying to hurry
It's
it up.
okay.
Charge
You're
more,
going to
though.
pay way more than it's actually worth.
I said that's
Their
Jefferson.
their regular product, Jefferson, makes some pretty good bourbon, but the ocean stuff, you're going to pay like $30 more, and it's just not worth the price.
So this particular one kind of was scorched earth for me.
A little bit. And you add
Okay,
some
and
water.
so now I know what you picked up on when you say it's hot because it was hot here and then it went straight to my roof.
Yep.
And it
It's
was
also
hot
higher
there.
proof. This is
Okay.
100 proof, 50% alcohol.
And then, but then like I said, I added 3 to 4 drops of water, and it was probably
Smooth it out.
smoothed it
Yeah,
out
did,
for
yeah.
me.
Smoothed it out.
So now I understand the purpose of the water in my life. Okay, and I also understand why I enjoy the ice cube because I like it chilled, and it brings everything down to a different level of abrasiveness. Okay, and I mean, I'm sure some people would think I was crazy for doing that.
And there's
Okay,
also, if anyone tries to shame you, you can just tell them to.
yeah, I
turn
do.
off.
Yeah, you can. I don't know if you
because-
figured that about this group,
My
but
brother and I are
What
very
you like?
different.
yeah, I bought it. What are you worried
blenders,
about?
He's a Scotch guy. I
Yeah,
like
the
bourbon
blenders
a
who
little
make
bit
this
more.
stuff, they're tasting it at like 25% APV,
How do they? The tasters? How do they? I mean, once
and
you
then they bring it back up.
how do they get it to where they can actually taste it? Because if they're tasting something 25 times a week, right?
Yeah.
Sooner or later, they're just going to get used to the flavor, and it's going to be okay.
That's why
good.
they bring it down. You're kind of then they bring it down. They bring it to 25% ABV
because then they're able to pull out the flavors, not the alcohol.
They can put the pieces together before they turn the volume back up. When I first started, I was kind of doing like sometimes it was like bartending stuff because I love mixology and I have a whole catalog of cocktails that I really like. But kind of just like it wasn't what I was looking for out of my business.
Right.
So I do private events. And what I started with after I was just like, okay, I'm not just a nicer bartender. I have knowledge and I'm going to leverage that. I do whiskey tastings. That was just like the first thing. I do events, whiskey tastings.
Right.
Then after that, people are just like, oh, can you do like, because we're in Southern Arizona, people like tequila. Can you do tequila? And I was like, well, I don't know a lot about tequila. But I was like, if you sponsor me the bottles, I will, deep dive. There's knowledge that I have and it kind of translates.
Sure.
I will get really in the nitty gritty and I will do a tequila tasting for you. And I can do that. I've done it with rum. I kind of do gin sometimes. Some people just want something completely weird. So I kind of mix it up a little bit. You make a story with where you're going through the bottles. I've done the most recent one. I did a cocktail pairing for a guy's birthday party where they made this huge paella. And I was for the different courses. I did different cocktails. And then
we love food.
We ended with a whiskey tasting that was a little bit smaller because they already had a lot of drinks throughout the night.
Is it expensive to host you?
It depends on what you get.
Okay.
Typically the process goes is I have maybe like a half-hour conversation with someone and it's just like, tell me what you want out of the event. Do you want it to be really nerdy? Do you want it just kind of be chill, more relaxed? How long do you want it is the bigger thing because that will determine how many bottles I bring.
Got it.
And then based on that, I will put everything into my spreadsheet. Because it's set up that I have the bottles all cataloged, so I just put the name of the bottle. This is the 6 bottles. It'll tell me the total price of the event.
Okay.
And then I tell them, this is my, these are the bottles. I have a short description of each.
Sure.
Of what I'm bringing. The kind of things to look for in the tasting is like before we get really into the deep and nitty gritty of it. And I said, this is about the time frame that it'll take. These are the bottles, general notes. This is the price. Does that sound good?
Do you have the ability to supply the bottles? Is that what you know? That's what you would prefer to do.
I supply glassware and I supply the knowledge and I supply the alcohol.
Okay. And
you just have to show up and have a good time.
Wow, pretty amazing.
And if you want, I always encourage people to if you want to have fun, do some charcuterie. I can recommend some items based on what I'm bringing.
This has to be our next client event.
You just have a good time, man.
I think we'd be good.
Yeah.
Talk to us. We probably would like to do a client event.
We had about 60 people at the last one.
And so
that's a lot more booze, I guess.
With 60 people, it's probably easier to do I am a part of the event rather than the main event because it is just me.
Sure.
I can talk to 60 people. I have no problem with that.
No, we just set you up in the corner.
Yeah, and people want to kind of roll through and be like, hey, you want to try
what's going on over there? Yeah, that's what we would do.
I've done that before, and that's a great idea.
Yeah, so we'll talk to you about that. But what I really, really, really want to get into is
the last bottle.
Some stats about the bottle while we're pouring around this guy here. So this one is from the region of Isla. It is non-chill filtered, which is something you'll see on a bottle a lot these days. So chill filtration is you're putting it basically through a filter.
Okay.
And it's all visual marketing because if you chill whiskey, it'll get cloudy. And someone decided that didn't look nice. So you basically filter out all of these kind of natural fats and lipids and things like that make it cloudy, but it also impacts the flavor.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
It impacts the texture. So any bottle that says non-chill filtered, they're trying to get the most pure, genuine product to you as possible. So this is a 25% refill French oak, which typically gives you some kind of lighter, white wine-ish kind of sherry flavors to it, at least from my experience. And then 75% first fill American oak. So it's predominantly American, but you do have a little bit of French oak casks in there.
So that's not a reused American barrel. That's new.
It is a first fill means first fill after they get it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so it could have
a first fill is your first refill.
Okay. So just a unburnt barrel, does that give you any flavors at all?
Not much.
Okay.
But it really just depends on what you're trying to get out of the.
Is it the deeper the char, or is it just
They have different levels of char.
Right. I mean, to the point.
It will make it darker and it will give you more of those kind of tannic flavors.
And does it Is it just flame, or do they put it over a fire with like?
They put this thing on like a rotisserie and a blowtorch and just spin it with a fire.
So what I was thinking is if I took mesquite wood, flip the barrel upside down. I'm just thinking, all of a sudden that mesquite's what's smoking me and kind of flaming up in there. Is that going to add flavor or not really?
Like
It's
Del Bach
it's whatever the wood is made out
It's
of.
what the wood is. So
But with Del Bach, they're malt whiskey and they're doing a lot of their mash, but they smoke the mash. So instead of doing it like with the barrel, they have their whole grain that they're just roasting over this kind of fire effectively.
And then they put it in all sorts of different kind of barrels. They do it in old wine barrels and
but that's how you get the smoke.
Yeah.
Is you smoke the grain, not the barrel.
So what'd you guys think of this one?
I haven't even tried it yet.
Slosh it down, guys.
You get cream, vanilla.
See, I'm
Not
just
as much
not.
lactic.
I don't smell anything but whiskey. Okay, and I think it's
that one's good.
and that's just over time. It is good though.
Yeah. He just told us that this one is 72% wheat in the mash.
Both
Well, who's she?
selectable
Let's
flavors,
talk about her a little
profiles,
bit.
reminiscent of
We
baked
met
goods.
Sue Horn and Gary Weber at what was that? Oh, Total Wine and More, and the sommeliers.
Sommeliers.
Is it called the same thing? Is it a sommelier?
I think effectively now it's good enough to call it that. I'm pretty sure the wine
That's what
people
she called
are
herself.
holding on to that name as much as they can, but they're sommeliers.
She called herself.
They're-
Yeah, and
they
I
do
got to
the
give
same
Sue
thing.
this. Sue flew in just for this event with them, and she is passionate about her bottles. I that woman took us up and down the aisle, and she shared different brands with us
Yeah,
that
she did.
she even enjoyed.
She's actually the one who recommended this.
The other one,
Woodinville.
Yeah.
and then what she did is we actually had a little less expensive bottle of this, and she said, "No, wait, this one's on sale today, and it's a better quality.
Yeah.
You might want to try this for a couple dollars more."
Yeah. It was
To
only
me,
a couple bucks more.
this was pretty darn good.
Oh yeah.
Even
What'd
on
you
a
pay for this one? Like
$45.
45
that's a killer
bucks.
find. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And they're having a special. I mean, I hate to plug it this way, but they're having a special across all Total Wine and More. You get a better price. So you might want to check
It's
into
like
it.
$10 off.
And I
That's
like
good.
it's from Bend, Oregon. Everything now is coming from Bend, Oregon.
For a distillery who's like a little bit smaller scale, partnering with Total Wine is great publicity. That's probably why she's so passionate. I mean, anybody who's in this industry will just, it's not just their product, but they love a ton of stuff.
I'm
This
sure
is-
she said they only have like 17 people that work for them.
Yeah.
I think
And they had 2 of them here.
what are they? Triple gold? What did they say they were, Matt? They got a bunch.
They won
The San Francisco or
Yeah.
the
San Francisco, I think, or it may be international. I don't know what they said.
Yeah, but she was very proud, very very proud. Now then you said they only put out 668 bottles a year.
No, 685
Barrels, and we don't know the size of those barrels.
This one was the one we're drinking now is the San Francisco World Spirits Competition 2016 Double Gold,
Yeah.
which is the highest award that is given to a spirit of that competition.
All right, if you got to have one of
don't want
these,
to.
which one would you want to take?
Just one?
Yeah, yeah.
I would still. I feel bad saying it. I still feel this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I
love
like
this.
that one.
I love this one a lot. If I had to pick like a second,
That was a
probably
blowtorch to me,
would
man.
either be that one
I like this
or
one.
the Woodinville. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like a blowtorch to me.
It was good once I put some water in
So
it.
maybe I just need to adjust it
But
to
it's
my
just a few
liking.
drops of water change
Yeah,
everything.
because it's this like it kind of gives me that vibe that, and I always do association, both memory and flavor is so huge in whiskey. Because some people will drink something and be like, "This reminds me of this time I was in this cabin when I was like 14, and this atmosphere." It brings you to a place, and that's what I love about having people experience new.
I think
New
for me, just because probably
Those are good.
is just because I like the taste.
It's interesting because it was
Are
the
these
one
two
that
bottles.
Sue has something to do with making, and then the one that she recommended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me,
She knows her stuff.
which is obviously a novice sipper, but I'm a pro chugger. Give myself some street cred. These two were the
I've been around. You
these
know?
two. The Japanese one, it was just not my jam. There's probably better Japanese.
I like that one a
This
lot.
one here is pretty good. I didn't.
This is like a $30
okay.
bottle. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of this one.
Yeah.
This one's okay. This one, I'd have to doctor it up a little bit for
The
me.
only 3 I've tried out of all the ones you guys are drinking, I've actually tried these
Yeah.
before. So I do like, I like Glenfiddich. I always have, and I do like this. I've tried that on a number of occasions. So
Special editions, are they worth buying or are they good to get as a
It
gift?
depends. If you're buying someone who is a whiskey person a gift, you are basically like buying clothes for your wife.
Okay.
Oh yeah, so bad idea.
And that is a pure whiskey drinker, right? That is somebody like just a casual drinker's not going to know much different.
Yeah, if it's someone, if you want to impress them and they say they drink whiskey, but they're not really into it, you could buy a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue and they'll be like, oh my God, it's so great. Thank you so much.
All of you understand I'm doing a Johnny Walker Blue, so you can get the one with the dragon on it.
If you buy me a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue, I would say, thanks.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Really?
Because I know you spent a whole lot of money for something that's not that good.
$350 is
It's
what
not worth it.
Matt wouldn't buy it for me. I asked.
You're better off buying the green label, which is actually year dated. Green label is a 15-year-old. There are restrictions on that.
Okay.
And it's the blue is just you're paying for the name, you're paying for the bottle, you're paying for the marketing, you're paying for the label. And the whiskey is like not even tertiary. It's like fourth or fifth in line as far as what's important for that bottle.
Gotcha.
But it's something that is nice that you can buy for someone who isn't really
For me.
inducted into and it tastes it as far as an introduction whiskey, I think it's great.
Okay.
I just don't think it's great for the price.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Because I like Johnny Walker.
Sitting in their bar. Hey, you got a bottle of
If that
Johnny
bottle
Walker
cost
Blue,
$100,
Right.
I'd buy it all the time.
Okay.
But it doesn't. It costs double. If
Now,
not
I'll
more.
drink Johnny Walker all day, okay, and then some probably.
They make good stuff.
Right.
It's just that, like you said, with the price, it's like, hey, you can spend $100 and get.
Well, this was
It's interesting.
this was
that you
$40.
say, like, you like Johnny Walker a lot, but then you
Put some ice in
gravitate
it.
towards the bourbons instead of the Scotch.
Well, I'm picking out of here.
No, I'm saying, but there
Yeah.
were Scotch here, and Johnny Walker is Scotch.
It's
Yeah.
blended Scotch. Yeah.
All right, here we go. We're trying to try to educate myself and the public. What's the difference between Scotch, bourbon, and whiskey?
Scotch has to be made in Scotland. It is whiskey from Scotland.
Is that it?
There are some other restrictions, but the biggest thing to know is that it is whiskey from Scotland.
And they have a different
And it
process
has to be
that they use, I
has to
think.
be 100% malted barley.
Okay, so
As far as the grain.
so it has to come from Scotland. We cannot call it a Scotch if it's from here.
Correct.
Because there's no Scotch USA.
That's true.
Yeah.
Scotch whiskey.
So there's really no difference except there obviously
The
is,
grain.
right?
The main difference is the grain and Scotland holding onto the name.
Okay, so all right, so they kind of have the copyright to the name,
Pretty much.
and that's what we're buying.
As I said, whiskey history is a bunch of old guys arguing about legality.
Well, that's kind of why I expect you to be an old guy. I got to be
true,
honest.
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I feel like one of my back's going
but
out,
trust
so-
me, if I'm at a party, you're the guy I
party,
want,
pal.
right? You have the look, you have a beard, that helps us out.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I grew this out for a very specific reason.
Threw on the beanie, man. We could dress you up in any ways.
The beanie was actually unintentional because there's these guys out of Southern California that make watches out of whiskey barrels.
Oh, really?
So this is a Buffalo Trace barrel,
got
and
it.
you can see the numbering. This is kind of my not like a flex, but it's
No flex. We love watches around here.
it's a Buffalo Trace. Everything from the dial to the inlets on the band are all part of a repurposed whiskey barrel.
Can we put a link up there, please?
Is Original Grain.
Original grain. Yeah, we'll
They
put a link
do,
up there because
A lot of reclamation
pretty
work
cool, man.
because they do whiskey barrels, they do tequila barrels, beer barrels, forest firewoods, old retro guitars, repurposed ocean plastics.
love
stuff
the
like
color
that.
on that band.
Yeah,
Boy.
and
Yeah,
they have
I saw
different
that
ones.
They're doing one now, like you said, for a veteran.
Yeah, they
deal,
did a
so
Jack
for-
Daniels
yeah.
collaboration. This one specifically is from Buffalo Trace.
That's cool.
Well, guys, I've had a great time.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, appreciate it. Thank you, Ray, for joining us. And we want to make sure we
see
give
you
Ray
later this
Alston
week.
credit. He's the one that actually brought this guest to us.
Yeah.
If you decide not to use us in real estate, make sure you use Ray. Ray's a good guy, and we appreciate
agree,
you.
yeah.
Thank him for his service.
Yes, always as a vet. Here's to Ray. All right, Josh, tell me where we can find you.
Well, you can. I have my Instagram, which
Okay.
has it's my main advertising because that's where I show all my bottles.
Okay.
I have pictures of my shelf, my collection on there. That's at JDMINTUC. That's my initials in Tucson. And any client, you guys as well, or feel free to text me, call me, leave a message, trying to set something up.
Man, I want to thank you. You
thank
did
you so
this
much.
on
You
the
guys are
spare.
great.
You did this on the spare moment. I know I get a little goofy. Matt likes to be serious, but let's make our wheels turn anyway. But man, you are a resource that
the
we're going to lean
sommelier
on.
world is filled with a bunch of stuffy old guys, and I do not want to.
Aren't you supposed to have a
contribute
chain
that.
with a cup around?
Something like that?
Aren't
yeah.
you supposed to be wearing that?
But all I want to do is to have people enjoy their time, get some new experiences, and walk away feeling like you learned something.
If you have any questions about today's show, feel free to reach out to us directly. at smithandbollinger at longrealty.com. And always remember, we're here for you for all your real estate needs. Whether it's residential, commercial, investment, or land, we got you covered.